Hi all, this is Jan Almighty and welcome to this video. So today I bring you back the Fischer story and let's just move on what happened in 1959. After the tournament in Mar del Plata, which we covered last week, and those couple of games where he played against very strong players, he moves on to another tournament in South America in Santiago, Chile. And there the tournament wasn't as strong in Mar del Plata and definitely isn't as strong as the next tournament where Fischer will be going in Zurich in Switzerland. But nevertheless, we have a couple of games that are interesting, so I decided to show them to you. And this one, the first one, is definitely a very interesting one. Here he plays against Ludek Pachman, at that time a Czechoslovakian grandmaster, a very strong grandmaster, and let me just show you because this title definitely explains a lot what happened in this game. So Pachman is with white pieces and Fischer is with black pieces. So they start with the ready opening, but very quickly they transpose in the Anti-Nimzo-Indian with c4, e6, d4 and d5. Now after this we see e3 and Fischer continues with knight to c6. So a move that is played, but not usually when you see d4. Knight to c3 and now putting the bishop on b4, a pretty common thing. Bishop to d2, going castles, a3, making this bishop decide will he capture and go back to e7, and we see bishop captures on c3. Bishop captures on c3 and knight to e4, a very common idea because now this bishop is here and probably black would like to capture it, not to allow white to have a bishop pair. But let's see what happened in the game. Pachman plays queen to c2. If black captures, you capture with a queen. a5 now. Okay, a5 is a move, but also you can play knight to c3 if you want to get rid of the bishop pair immediately. But here, a5 is played, not allowing b4. But we have another idea by Pachman. b3, and now we see b6 and bishop to b2. Moving the bishop from the c file, since now this knight is undefended, this could be used as a valuable resource, so in further development and improving your position. And now Fischer goes really at it, bishop to a6. So my thinking was that probably he would like to develop the bishop on b7, but he plays it to a6 to not allow the capture on d5 and attack this bishop. But once again, this knight is undefended and there are a lot of tricks involved in this situation. But you cannot capture immediately. But first let's go over a couple of moves. Bishop to d3, normal development move, and f5. Further, stabilizing the knight in the center, and we have rook to c1. Once again, even more pressure on the c file. When the pawn will capture, this will be something. And Fischer, because of that, plays rook to c8. Totally leaves this bishop on a6 and goes for the defense on the c file. Can you capture on d5? Well, if you do, black can simply capture on d3, and if you go into this variation where queen captures on c6, pawn captures on d5, and I just wanted to go over this variation because it is very interesting, but in the end black holds the game. Knight to e5, attacking the bishop. So bishop has to move, bishop to e6, and now queen to e6. It seems that white has won the exchange. After king to h8, knight to f7, you have to capture either because otherwise you will be put into the smarter checkmate. So rook to f7, queen to f7, and now queen to g5. The only move that saves black. Because now, as you can see, white cannot go castle, and he is pretty defenseless there, having all these pieces attacking in front of him. What will you do? Will you play g3? Well, then there is this queen to g4 threatening checkmate, and everything is forced here. Rook to c2 defending, queen to f3 attacking the rook to g1 because on f1 the bishop is attacking, and now knight to g5 attacking the queen to d7, and knight to h3 once again attacking the rook. Rook needs to move to f1, queen to g2. So not capturing, of course, on f1 because you will get checkmated, but queen to g2 threatening to capture. Rook to e2, and now finally the finishing move, which is knight to g5. And you need to see all of that with black pieces in order to get out of this position and essentially win the game. Because now knight to f3 is unstoppable, and the king will have to move. We will pick up first this rook and then this rook. The other idea I wanted to go through with you is if you play rook to g1, then queen to h4. threatening to capture on f2. If queen captures on f5, you can capture on h2, attacking the rook. Now if you play rook to f1, simple queen to g2, and this rook cannot be defended. So you play something like king to d1, but once again queen can just capture. The king goes to c2 and queen captures on g2. You'll capture on f2 as well, and as you can see, black is a piece up and he is just gobbling up the pawns, the Pachman style, but in Fischer's implementation. So definitely this variation doesn't look too good for white, and Pachman doesn't go for it. He plays castles. Now we see rook to f6, and Fischer already has a plan. He will put the rook on the h file and go for the attack. Rook from f to d1 and rook to h6. And now bishop to f1. White has completed this development, and now he needs to find the best way how to counter how to counter black's center. We have g5, so Fischer immediately goes for it. And since black is attacking at the side of the board, so on the king side, you should definitely go about making some room in the center. And Pachman does just that. He captures on d5. And now this is a very interesting situation, because as you can see, a lot of things are happening. First of all, this bishop is undefended. So essentially the best move here was to capture on f1. But to go through with it, you would really need to see all the possible variations. If king captures on f1, pawn captures on d5, and everything is defended. So the knight by the rook, you'll plan to push g4. If knight to e5 is played, you can simply capture, pawn captures, and this is pretty much the simplest of variations. But in the end, this doesn't look promising for black, even though the position is kind of equal. The king is wide open. You cannot capture on h2 because queen to c6 is too big of a threat, going into your ranks with the queen, and also threatening capture on d5. It doesn't seem too good for black. If you, for example, don't capture on f1, if you after capturing on f1 capture the knight on c6, then bishop can capture on g2, and then definitely you need to capture the bishop, otherwise you lose this valuable knight, and having the bishop on f3 is a very good thing for black. So king to g2, g4, and attacking the knight with the tempo, of course. You can play rook to g1 or knight to d2. If you play knight to d2, then queen to h4 even. Knight captures, queen to h2, king to f1, and now pawn captures on e4. Once again, you will go into this variation where you play rook to f8, for example, and go for the checkmate. Black is feeling quite good here. So this is something that you can go for as well. But the safest route is definitely to capture on f1. But Fischer didn't do that. He played g4 immediately. And this allows bishop to a6, which Pachman did. Pawn captures on f3 and pawn captures on f3. Can you capture the rook on c8? Well, you shouldn't be too greedy. Already you have a piece, so after pawn capturing on f3 and a rook to c8, queen comes to g5. And now, how will you stop checkmate on g2? You have to play g3, and you can play bishop to e6, but king can play on h8, f8, it doesn't really matter. Still you have to play g3, and now rook to h2. And now if king captures, queen to h5, queen to h3, and queen to g2 is an unstoppable checkmate. So you have to actually capture with the queen the knight so that the bishop can stop the checkmate, being eyeing the h3 square. So definitely don't be too greedy. Here Pachman captured, which is the best move. Now queen to g5, king to f1, the only move, and rook to h2. Okay, you can go to h1, but you don't want to go there. You don't want to get checkmated. Rook to h2, and now pawn captures on e4. Sorry. So, which is the best move? Still, you don't want to capture on c8, but once again, you don't want to be greedy. You can just pick up a piece. And now, what black needs to play? And now Fischer plays rook to f8. So he needs to go for the attack immediately. He leaves this knight, of course, because it isn't good to capture the knight. queen to g2 is coming, and after king to e2 there is this check, king to e4 there is this check, and if you move c4 c3 you will also lose this bishop. So this is essentially a lost position for white, sorry, for Pachman. So he definitely didn't want to capture on c6, but he also didn't want to allow capturing the pawn on e4 and opening up the f file. And you really need to find the best move in this situation. Actually, the best move is to play rook to d2, so that if captures on e4, queen can capture on e4. And that is the whole idea and the whole point, that you are allowed to move your queen, because now rook is defending on f2. And now this queen is also eyeing the h1 square, and what you need to find is if pawn captures on d5, as you can see, the queen cannot still stay on this diagonal, but there is this queen to d5 move. Queen has to capture and bishop to c4, and now, yeah, the queen will be captured. So in the end you will give the piece up, but you're a pawn up in a better position, and white is winning this game. So, but yeah, this was a hard find for Pachman. So instead of that, instead of rook to d2, he played e5, so not allowing the opening of the file. But Fischer plays f4, still wants to go at it. Pachman plays e4, and I just want to stop you for a moment, because in a very long time I haven't seen a setup such as this one. Having the 4 pawns on the 4 main squares in the center of the board like this is just amazing. So just wanted to stop there for a moment to show you that. But Fischer, of course, didn't mind that. He played f3, and all of a sudden Fischer is the one who really holds the advantage. He threatens checkmate in 1, and king to e1 is the only move. But now you actually have to find what is the best continuation for black. The best continuation is to capture on e5, because after pawn captures you play knight to e7, and you need to include this knight into the game. First, of course, move it from this danger of being captured, and also include it into the attack. If, for example, white will play something like bishop to c4, defend the pawn and threaten to push d6, you can go about playing knight to f5, d6, king to h8, and after, for example, capturing, knight to e3 is a big threat. And this essentially will give black will give white a checkmate. The queen is attacked. If you move the queen, then a simple knight to g2, king f1, rook to h1 is checkmate. And if you don't, you will lose the queen. Also, if you capture, queen to e3, and with whatever you cover with, rook to h1 is still checkmate. So that is the whole point. So this should have been Fischer's idea, but he didn't capture on d5. He played queen to g1 immediately. And I understand this move, because it's a natural move to make, and it's a move that you would definitely make, especially if you're in time trouble or anything. And this idea with the knight and capturing, it's really hard to find in a real game. And now, actually, this allows white to escape from the danger. King to d2, queen captures on f2, and king to c3. Now you don't want to exchange queens, because your piece down, also your knight is attacked, so queen to g3. And now it is pretty simple for Pachman. If a queen would have come on e3, you can simply cover with the queen and everything is good. So queen to g3, and what we see now is queen to d3, moving the queen out of the way. Pawn captures on d5, the knight isn't attacked anymore, but now everything is pretty much forced. Rook to g1, the queen is attacked, you cannot move it, you have to defend. Rook g2. Rook captures on g2, you cannot capture with the pawn because the queen will fall. So queen to g2. Queen to f1. Pachman wants to simplify, and he wants to exchange queens. Pawn captures on e4. Fischer doesn't provide too much resistance here. He is already in the lost position, being a piece down. So queen to g2. Pawn captures on g2 and rook to g1. Now rook defends on f2 this pawn, and we see a final strike, bishop to c4 check. King moves to f8, and now bishop to d5, attacking the knight and also attacking the pawn. Fischer is already in a lost position. Playing some tactics wouldn't help him that much. He can play here, for example, knight to d4, and after king to d4, capture on b2, winning the pawn. But he is a piece down, so doesn't really have time for tactics like that. So he plays knight to e7, and so he plays rook to f3 first, check, king to c4, and now b5. Pachman can capture on b5 or play king to c5, but he plays king to c5. Both moves win. Knight to e7, and we see rook to g2. Knight captures on d5, king captures on d5, and rook captures on b3. Now king captures on e4, and Pachman got rid of a last passed pawn from Fischer. Fischer plays b4, pawn captures on b4, pawn captures on b4, and in this position, Fischer resigned the game. So Pachman had a really good chance with capturing, of course, on a6, winning a piece there, and all he had to do was survive Fischer's attack. But Fischer, essentially, with pushing the pawns and having such an amazing position, essentially at one point had the win in his hand. And that is how it usually is. And when you pressure your opponent, it is really hard to find sometimes the winning move, especially in such a wild position as this one, having the 4 pawns in the middle of the board. But Fischer didn't find it, and yeah, it just happens. The chess is a game like that. But okay. This is pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this game. I will definitely show at least one other game from the Santiago tournament of 1959. And yeah, I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.